do end up being the ones that help us the most. And this is things I've heard other people that are spiritual say. This isn't just a mom thing, of like doing the things that you resist the most. You know, like I've read a book and this woman was like, there's specific tasks or activities with said book, and she's like, whatever ones you feel the least compelled to do, my suggestion is to do those ones. The ones that you feel like you don't need to do, I would do those ones because you probably do need to do them. And it's like, it's always the opposite of what our egos want us to do or be aware of and all of that. And I feel, you know, we will make excuses to going deeper into these systems or trying to understand it within ourselves because our ego doesn't want us to know who we really are, because then we find our soul purpose, we figure out our higher self path of why we're here. And the ego doesn't want you to do that. The ego wants you to stay in the matrix. It wants you to keep doing what you're doing out there and not grow and evolve because it can't grow and evolve. So it usually is those things that you know, don't feel like doing that end up being the most beneficial.
True, like, that's what I was like talking about when I was doing the podcast yesterday about the North and South nodes, because I was, you know, been doing the different archetypes of the planet, so you can kind of understand what they're doing in your chart. But the North and South node to me are so interesting because it feels to me like those are the two placements where, at least in astrology, I'm sure we can look at it similarly in human design, is those are the only placements where it's not gonna come naturally. Like, you're not going to naturally gravitate towards your North Node because it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's the same. That's what Kim says about the South Node in human. She's like, you're gonna want to stay there.
Exactly.
You're gonna. It's your comfort zone. I mean, it's the same energy with the nodes in human design with astrology, where it's like, you're not gonna want to be there. You're not going to want to embody it. You're going to want to stay in the South Node where you're the most comfortable, where the ego is, because it's already mastered it. So it's, again, the ego excuse of, I don't have to do this because I've already mastered this, that, and the other thing. And that will typically be your South Node.
Yeah. So it's like, that's the one that's the hardest in essence, because you have to actively work towards it. Like, I think learning your blueprint can be a little bit easier because once you have the awareness, like, it starts transforming. Like, you kind of naturally start transforming once you become aware of your programmings, aware of the shadows. Like, yes, you're still going to have to do some inner work for that, but like, the more that you're discovering about yourself, the more it's kind of naturally evolving. And the North and South nodes just aren't like that. Like, you're going to have to keep choosing to be uncomfortable towards the North Node. But that I was feeling into it, and I was like, I think why we stay in the South Node as comfortable is, well, A, obviously it's comfort, but B, because there's a part of our, like, desires that still lie there, that we still, like, have this innate wanting to fulfill those desires, so we keep playing in the South Node. And it just came through for me yesterday of, like, if you just keep choosing the North Node, you will ultimately get those desires fulfilled.
Yeah, it just won't be the way that the ego wants it to, because it's used to getting what it manifested from the South Node, and that's just, it's an expired comfortability because it comes from your most recent past life. Doesn't matter what that is, doesn't matter what you did, but what the ego is going off of is whatever is from an incarnation that you are currently not in, so it's an expired kind of energy, so you have to kind of sift through that. And, you know, I do think, and I do feel Kim talks about this in human design of, like, and you've said it too, of, like, it's the foundation to, you have to, kind of not master it, you have, and you have to give yourself that confidence that you have mastered the South Node to some degree, but that kind of, whatever zone of comfort comes from that South Node, is you have to still be pushing up to that North Node. You have to,
like, apply it towards that.
Yes, it's like a foundation that we all came down here born with on a soul level. We had
you're
that
naturally
structure.
Gifted already.
Right, like you
in that area.
Yeah, so it's like you don't need to focus on that because this lifetime, this incarnation is pretty much for everybody tying up loose ends. What we didn't do in other lifetimes, what we didn't get to accomplish is now having to play out.
And then I was thinking about it in terms of, like, the collective transits of, like, so to me, right, in a way, your birth chart, North and South nodes, are timelines. The South node represents the past timeline, right? North node is your future timeline, and so your You're wanting to take the past and clear it of all of its ego shadows and stop living in the past and start moving towards the higher timeline. But then I thought about it in terms of the collective, and I'm like, okay, so it shifts every 18 months. So essentially every 18 months we're on a different timeline. And so if we don't collectively like align with that North Node, that's where people get stuck on the lower timelines because they get stuck in the South Node and they don't kind of get the push. And so I was just contemplating all of this because I think the North and South Node right now is a very interesting one to have, the Aries and Libra, mostly because it affects me the most, but also because I'm like, North Node Aries is quite a strong North Node to be having for the collective.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting and weird how the nodes go backwards.
It is.
Like, right? It just doesn't, it's kind of mind-blowing in the sense that everything goes forward, not retrograde, and the node shifts are constantly going, and it's the same in human design. Right. I think they still go like in a reverse way versus the you go through the gene keys throughout the year. So it's like, yeah, I don't know why it just kind of trips me out a little bit in terms of like, why does that go backwards? And I don't know, maybe in 5D they'll start to go forwards. I don't know, as we go back, we're clearing old timelines.
Probably.
Because, North Node Aries gives me a lot of like Roman Empire kind of feelings where it was domination and control, and then you get in a year and a half, 18 months, it will be like January 2025. When the nodes will go into Pisces and Virgo.
Yes.
Oof. Okay. But like Age of Aquarius and then the Pisces energy.